You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. The August 4th primary election is fast approaching Washington voters, and we're continuing our look at one of the hottest statehouse races on the ballot. That is Legislative District 32, which includes Northwest Seattle, Shoreline, Edmonds, Woodway, Mountlake, Terrace, and Lynnwood. This is position one. Longtime Representative Cindy Ryu is running for a state Senate seat, leaving that position open. And there are a bunch of Democrats vying for this blue seat. For this round of interviews before the primary, we're focusing on candidates who have raised more than $50,000 to fund their campaign. Today, I'm joined by Chris Bloomquist. He is a startup founder and the owner of a recruiting firm. Chris, thank you so much for joining me on Soundside and talking about your candidacy.
My pleasure. It's going to be a lot of fun.
So you have not been elected to office before. Tell me, why now? Why are you running, and what are you pitching to voters for the reason they should pick you?
That's a great question. So part of it is my Latino heritage. So I'm a Chilean American. My mother was born and raised in Chile, and she escaped Pinochet's kind of terror rule in the 70s. And so it's not performative when I say that I understand what tyranny looks like. It's affected my family. I've had family members politically murdered. So part of it is just understanding the moment right now that when democracy is eroded in such a way like it is, I feel like the need to step up. So part of it is that timing itself. And after reading On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder, I was really activated. The other part is I was asked. So State Representative Lauren Davis asked me to run. And the reason why is I've been going to Olympia, as a concerned parent, as a nonprofit leader for things like equitable pay for women, for fully funded schools. And through that, got to know really all three of our elected officials. And Representative Davis has really formed a professional relationship with my family. And when you get asked to serve by your elected official, you say yes, then you go knock on 10,000 doors. So there we are.
Wow, 10,000? Is that really?
My goal is 10,000 before the primary, and I'm almost there.
All right. You're going to have to have a special glove for your knuckles or something. So talk to me about your campaign. You talked about tyranny and the way you were kind of activated to decide to run. Other things that your campaign website mentions, AI safety and public school funding, some of the issues around civil rights. What would your first priority be in Olympia if elected?
Yep, and it's right on my campaign lit, so I'll be consistent with it, which is fully fund our public schools. We have an approximately $500 billion shortfall. And part of it is just, I'll say, legislative will. What I've learned by running is that there are actually not a lot of parents in the legislature. And so part of it is just a prioritization that, hey, I have two daughters that are going to public schools. And so I know firsthand from my neighbors, from my friends, from my own daughter's experiences, what a lack of fully funded schools actually means and how it affects us. And so it's about prioritization and being really prescriptive about fully funding them. It's a constitutional crisis that we're not. So that's the big one for me. But I'm also a pragmatist. I'm an engineer. I'm an environmentalist. I'm a small business owner. And so it's also about economic growth and development and making this a Washington a pro-business state that puts people to work.
Let's talk about the budget, since you kind of brought up
Please.
Funding. The budget, state budget, is likely to be billions of dollars in the red over the next couple of years, although we got some good news from the capital gains receipts, for example. Republicans have said for years that this is a spending problem. It's not a revenue problem. I wonder, what do you think about that? Do you agree or disagree? And what's your solution?
Well, as a pragmatist Democrat, I believe it's more about creating economic development. So I'm not a fan of raising taxes. We'll start with that. I'm a fan of more equitable tax code that makes our state more progressive and not regressive. I mean, this is probably what every voter hears, but we are the second most regressively taxed state in the country. And what we don't focus on enough, though, is I have an abundant mindset. As a climate professional, I have to live that way. It's about abundance, not about what we don't have, but what we could have. And I believe that if we look at more equitable taxation, not only with, talk about the millionaire's tax and making it more equitable on sales tax so that working families have a more equitable tax code, but the same goes with small businesses. The B&O tax needs to be about profits, not revenue. It's a big miss. And so I think if we lean into our business leaders to say, what's a balanced budget look like? How do we incentivize companies to hire? 50% of our revenue comes from our tax base from employment. And no one's talking about that, which kind of drives me nuts. Like, we're talking about we have this crisis of funding. Well, let's actually make it easier to do business in Washington, keep our regulations, but incentivize businesses to hire and retain employees so we can increase our income levels, which will increase our tax base. That's what I'm focused on, is economic development.
The governor has said he does not want to support any new taxes this coming legislative session to close the gap. And so that'll mean cuts. Do you agree with the governor? No new revenue in order to close the budget hole? And if so, what do you want to see cut?
I think it's about being balanced, right? So it goes back to, we cannot increase taxes on working class families. When I've doorbelled, and I've doorbelled over 8,000 doors, it's very much like, we pay too much on property taxes. We pay too much on sales taxes. And so, it is about balancing the tax code. I think, if we focus on no new taxes for the right people, which is the working class, that I absolutely agree with. I think it's more about a partnership with business to say, where can we give and take? Maybe it's increasing taxes and creating a tax base on AI and data centers, right? To fully support our program, to say, look, I think we're over-indexing and over-relying on AI replacing people. That's not an equitable long game here. If we focus on taxing AI appropriately and putting people to work, again, I think we can have a more balanced code that isn't so focused on shortfalls.
Let me ask you about the AI data center thing, because It came up in an endorsement comment by the stranger. They did not decide to endorse you in this race. And
it's a quippy comment.
Yeah. So part of the dismissal was that they decided that your candidacy wasn't what they would support because you believe that rural people can benefit from data centers by putting solar panels on farms. Can you explain? I know you're laughing because I was confused by that as well. So what was that either misunderstanding or can you just explain what happened there?
So first of all, the question to all five of us that they used was, what is the most radical piece of legislation that you would put out there? They pushed us to give us kind of an off-the-cuff answer, and so I went there. Let me explain as succinctly as I can. Agrivoltaics. I hope this word goes out to all your public. Like, look up the concept. It's amazing. I am a farm kid from Nebraska. I'm a Latino. I'm a small business owner. I'm an engineer. Bring a lot of different lenses to this. And the Bloomquist family farm near Wausau, Nebraska, has been in 6 generations of families, and it's really hurting. And where does big tech want to put data centers? Mostly in rural areas. So it's this weird thing of like, well, I'm not pro or anti-AI per se. I just want it to be equitable. Everything for me is equitable. So farmers have an economic opportunity to create clean energy on existing land through agrivoltaics. If we give incentives for farmers to put solar panels over different crops and livestock, they could actually benefit from powering data centers directly. So it sounds obscure, but this is about my engineering systems level thinking. Like, how can we remove politics from economic development? And it always has to be community consented and driven. So that's what I was talking about. Like, there's these kind of maybe unwitting bedfellows of like, we could actually have some partnerships that benefit farmers and rural communities and work with big tech.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah. I'm glad I got that cleared up.
Thanks for asking that. I really wanted to clarify that. So that means a lot that you asked it.
So again, back to the budget. Obviously, sure. One of the biggest controversies or biggest achievements, however you want to see it, coming out of the last legislative session was the millionaire's tax, the tax on people making high incomes in this state. All the Democrats in this race, including yourself, are on record as supporting the millionaire's tax.
That's right.
What do you say to the criticism that Republicans have levied that says, this is going to creep down and it is going to no longer be just, in the millionaire tax bracket, it's going to affect working class people eventually. What is your response to that criticism?
I thought the Democrats were incredibly smart on the process of this, maybe not as much on the marketing. Here's what I mean. The process is about validating the constitutionality of the millionaire's tax, right? That, hey, after $1 million of income, you're going to be taxed. And then, of course, that, almost 100-year-old ruling that said, well, tax is property and all that. So it's
the uniformity clause, et cetera.
Yeah. That's right. So the Democrats, in my mind, are being really smart to say, let's test the constitutionality of it as well as generate revenue, because we are the second most regressive tax in the country. And that's why I go back to Republicans. Show me the data. the data says we do not equitably tax our citizens. I'm sorry, but if you make over $1 million a year, you can probably afford a little bit of tax. And that's just what it is. And I grew up food stamp poor. I've also had wealth in my life and everything in between. I've lived in never lived at that level, but I've had different levels of income in my life. And this is about equitability. So that's the first part. The second part is, I think the long game is to build voter trust. It's about marketing it better. When I go to doors, I've had people be confused by, Chris, my property's worth $1 million. I don't want to be taxed on it, and it's like, no. It's not about property. So it's really about educating the voters better on what it actually is. A good chunk know, but some don't. And so I think you get more buy-in that way, and you get more buy-in if it's also balancing to say, how are we making tax more progressive, lowering sales tax, fuel tax, things of that nature, so that working class families actually see a benefit beyond just the programs being funded.
Are you open to any other tax the rich policies in the coming years? One thing that has been floated is a version of the jumpstart tax, but statewide. So taxes on large businesses with big payrolls, something that Representative Sean Scott, for example, put forward in the last session, but it didn't move forward. Anything else, that you would support at the statewide level when it comes to again, tax the rich type policies or tax business policies?
Yeah, I'm open to that with an asterisk. I come to this with a ton of humility, right? I want to have an open door policy for all constituents, for all business owners, for all industry, open door policy, open-minded. And so I think that, in my opinion, some legislators have a bit, I don't want to say arrogance, but let's say presumptive nature to say, well, this is going to work, and so we're just going to do it. I don't ever want to vote on something I'm not well educated on. And so before I do any kind of consent on a tax increase for any organization or business, it'd be like, hey, let's have a conversation first. Where could it make sense? Where can we have give and take? Where can we have buy-in? That's how you build trust with constituents of all backgrounds. It's more about my process of listen, learn, and legislate, and never be presumptive on any of these decisions, because they affect everyone.
Chris Bloomquist, candidate for position 1 in Legislative District 32. That's for the State House. He's on the ballot for the August 4th primary election. Thank you so much, Chris. Really great to talk to you.
It's been a delight. Thank you so much.
That's Legislative District 32, Position 1 House seat candidate Chris Bloomquist. We've got 2 more candidate interviews for the 32nd District, Position 1 House seat. That's going to be coming before the end of the week. And this is part of Soundside's larger series on elections coverage. In upcoming weeks, you're going to hear from candidates in Washington's 4th Congressional District. That is Republican Representative Dan Newhouse's seat in Central Washington. The 3rd Congressional District in Southwest Washington, where Democratic Representative Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez is trying to hold on to her seat. And we're going to talk about what you should know about the state Supreme Court candidates that are heading to that primary ballot. I want to know from you, are there any races you especially want to hear about ahead of the primary election on August 4th? Any questions you want answered before you fill out your ballot? Let us know by emailing soundside@kuow.org. Again, soundside@kuow.org. Or you can leave us a voicemail at 206-221-3213, 206-221-3213. Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime right here online at kuow.org, or of course on your favorite podcast app.